Hey guys, it's Randy again with ofap.org. I had a couple of plans to show you a few new toys that I've gotten uh, with the holidays and work and life as it goes. I haven't done anything in 2 or 3 weeks. Um, First of all, I have purchased this 10 by 15 poly-coated tarp, and really I bought it for the thought and the intent of spring coming on. I thought I'd use it. Uh, I've got a fetish for a double layer cover, and I'm sure it's not a great insulator to a big extent, but it's still kind of my preference on things. But anyway, I've tried this 3 or 4 different configurations, and there's some really good configurations with just the tarp itself, but this is the best so far that I've come up with, a sleeper tent and a tarp above it. But like I said, just for double cover and moisture resistance. And also I think about things concerning heat. You've probably seen my previous video with the wood stove. I've downsized my one of my bags as far as my bug out bag, I guess you would call it, and I've got a smaller bag here that I carry quite a bit less. People call them get home bags. Instinctually I want to call it a pinch bag, because that's something that I would grab in a pinch if I had to get away from my car, what have you. And so I've got several items in it, but then I think about heat and think about the cold of night, and I came up with an idea that has to do with a homemade candle. In my opinion, candles, for the most part, emergency candles, candle heaters, they seem so minor as far as the difference in temperature that you would get. And also, you know, there's the factor of the fumes that something might put off inside of a tent. You know, first of all, fire is unsafe to sleep with. Everyone knows that inside an enclosed tent. And but fumes are a big property that needs to be thought about. You have to excuse the noise. Actually, I'm not in the mountains. I stated this before, and today is the same. I'm on some land that I own right off of the creek, but there's a bridge about a quarter mile to the north, so you always hear the echo of the highway. I'm somewhat to myself, but I'm not out in the middle of the boonies. And anyhow, I'm gonna do a couple of things. I got a couple of gifts for Christmas, and I want to show you those first, and then I'll talk to you about my candle and how that I think that my tarp will work out. Now guys, before it gets too dark to see what's going on, I wanted to give you an idea of a couple of things I've been thinking about. You have all these companies who sell emergency candles, candle lanterns, and what have you, and I don't have a lot of experience with those. As you know from my previous test, was with a wood stove in a full tarp tent. But I was thinking about this small sleeper, and I know that candles and what have you are unsafe when it comes to these kind of things. So as I've always said, don't do as I do. These are just some ideas that a guy might come up with in a pinch. But these candles that they sell, I've noticed one thing, that the wicks are quite small, and your amount of heat, too much heat, can cause paraffin or wax of various sorts to flame up. You don't want that in a tent. Too small a wick is not any more good than just a small source of light. But I built my own candle, and what I did with this is just a Vienna sausage can, and I used paraffin, and what I used for the wick, which gives it about 4 times the width of what you normally see, is these are wicks for a lantern, and they cost about, I don't know, $1.09, something like that. A package of paraffin will do about 4 of these cans full of wax. But what I did was I cut this lantern wick in half and actually folded it over, cut it again, and it's about 1/4 of, like I said, of the thickness of that wick that you're seeing right here. But I've also noticed something about candles. If you get a very large wick, you wind up, the candle heats up, the paraffin liquefies, and your wick winds up slipping down into the candle if you've got a candle, and it can put itself out. So I did wrap this wick as I created it with a small strand of very fine wire, and I've got one here that I've already tested. They put off quite a bit of soot and smoke when you first get them lit, but when they burn down and kind of level out where you can start using them, and that's where this one is now, they burn really clean. And what I've done, you really can't tell with this low light, but I've got dirt in this big can, and I just call it a Toucan Candle. And the reason is, there's this big can, then there's a smaller can with this candle sitting down in it. And all this is just a piece of strap iron or metal, I'm not sure what you'd call it. And I stuck a bolt through the end of a long piece in order to make this curved piece set above it. And it may not make any difference at all, but I think with the size of this flame, it might increase the ambient heat, I guess you would call it, with the flame hitting this piece of metal. And the end of this goes down into the dirt, so that makes me feel safe about these things. Anyway, I'm going to give this thing a try. There's also, I'd like to show you a couple of things here. My wife actually got me a heat gun, and I really like this thing. It's very accurate. It has a laser directional beam there, and see, it's showing 53 degrees on the ground, which is quite warm. And so I don't think that I'm going to get a good test inside this tent with a candle to know exactly, well, to be able to prove to someone on film exactly what the increase is in heat. But inside of 2 cans, as long as I keep an eye on this and it doesn't flame up, as long as I have plenty of ventilation, I think that this might be a plus if the guy's out on his own. And those things can fit in something like this here with just a kit of a few things. So that's my thought on these. But just a minute, I'll get some coffee going and we'll show you a few things. Okay, it is getting dark quick. It's just about sundown right around me. It's almost too dark to see. Just getting the fire started. I'm gonna see if I can get some water together here out of a container. I'm not very good with this camera, one piece at a time. There we go, things are starting to come to life. We'll get some hot water here in a bit. She's not quite to a boil, but she's getting there. This is nothing more than just a Starbucks caramel coffee container, but the plastic that they make these out of is almost as good as the sport bottles that you see that hikers use and what have you. So like I've always said, simple folks have simple ways. But I'm not boiling any coffee. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to mix some incense with that water. It's ready. We'll get it going. It's cooling down quite a bit out here. Anyway, cheers. Oh yeah, that's not bad. Not bad at all. Okay, this candle's been burning for about 25 minutes with the front of the tent closed, and I've got one vent open here. And let me see if I can get a reading, just a reading off of this bag. Looks like about 58.1, and my jacket's showing 55.6, and the ground is showing about 52.9. But the way that it feels to me, it feels like it's quite a bit warmer than that in here. This isn't putting off any fumes at all, and I'm proud of that. This flame, the extra width to the wick makes a world of difference as far as it burning clean, but with more heat. And let me see if I can get a temperature on the outside of the tent, and we'll see what kind of result we get overall. And like I said, this is only 25 minutes, but it should give us a good idea of what's taking place. The outside of the tent, showing 47 degrees right next to the tent, and 43.2 on a bag that's outside of the tent. So that kind of gives us an idea. Some objects showing 41.8 and 42.4. And at the peak of the tent, it's showing 58, 59, just touched on 59.9, 60.2, and locked at an even 60.